give you the floor because it is 4 o'clock and want to be respectful of everybody's time here today. And that way we've got recorded sessions and we'll be able to post it for anybody who wasn't able to make it. I received an email from somebody who emailed, said I'm not going to be able to make it and requested that. So we're all good and we're recording the session. So Katherine, the floor is yours. Welcome.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming today. On behalf of both the Federal Reserve and the MCEE, we're glad you could all make it in this strange time that we're having now. I'm excited to see 20 of you already, so that's great. Here at the Federal Reserve, we are starting a new program for our virtual tours. Today, I actually did one this morning for elementary school groups, so that's something that we don't usually host when we're in the building. I'm going to try to do a screen share here, and let's see here if I can get this to work the way I want to. Maybe not, because I'm not doing it right and we don't, sorry. I use WebEx mostly, so my Zoom skills are not as great as yours, you that are having classroom time now, but we do have a 45-minute presentation that we can do for your class. If you go to the chicagofed.org, and then to education, you'll see the link there for the Fed in your classroom. The one caveat is when you schedule a tour through that site, they can't get it to go to Eastern time. So you just have to remember that it's Central time for Chicago. Or you can just email me per our normal tour program, and I'm able to customize it a lot more for your classroom than Chicago is. However, we did have a teacher ask about if we have any ambassadors who can speak Spanish, and while I cannot, we do have an ambassador in Chicago who is willing to give you the tour there. Thank you. So yes, hit that education up along the top there. Yes.
Everyone got a visit?
Just hit education overall. I'm
Okay.
not sure if it'll go there from that. So if you hit that, and then you go to educator, hit that one. You can scroll through the rest of them and all you like, but there you see the Fed in your high school classroom. So that comes with, you can also go onto there, that is tells you about the 45-minute program that we have, but then this also gives you a link to the economic lowdown curriculum that both the MCEE and the Fed, we have highlighted this several times in the past, but you can go there to econ download from the San Francisco, or I'm not saying it's not San Francisco, it's St. Louis. They have put this all together and you can use their syllabus and it's all ready for you. They have all kinds of great stuff over there. So do we have, let's see if we go to the chat space, do we have any questions or anything you would like to know about the virtual tour program? I have given a high school level so far myself, and then again the elementary level. So far it seems to be working very well, even when we do English as a second language. So I would, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to talk about that. Or again, if you just email myself, Katherine Nelson at chicagofed.org, or I can put that, Martin or Derek, any of the three of us, they'll get it to me and we can schedule that tour for you. So I'm hoping that I get to talk to some more kids because I'm tired of my basement and I miss y'all. So
Katherine, is this would be really appropriate before you teach monetary policy? I'm guessing would be a great time to schedule something like this.
Yes, before monetary policy, we also have a slide presentation that I would be happy to share as well because it's all public knowledge, but it goes over what the Fed has done during COVID. So we have some updated slides that may not be out on the internet yet, but I'm happy to share that. I can either present it to your class or I can send it to you. Looks like Darcy is signing up already, so thanks, Darcy. I see your email came through.
That's great. So, like, how far ahead would a teacher need to sign up? It does, like, when we click on this, is there a scheduling tool? Like, do you pick your own day and time?
Yes. And that's the problem with their scheduling tool, is that it's only for Central Time. So you can use their scheduling tool, and that is absolutely fine. Or you can just email me, and I would say give me a week or two just to work it, just to find a calendar date that works for both of us. But you can see here, these are all the times that they have available. But again, make sure you note that CST, that's Central Time, so there's an hour time difference. For some reason, the software, they can't figure out how to put in Eastern time zone. So if you are if your class meets at a particular time during the day, make sure that you get the right class time. Or again, just email me. I am in your time zone, so that might be easier that way. I do have, if you have students that are interested, our other tour guide that some of you have talked to before, Marcus Matheson, who is actually one of our law enforcement officers, is excited to host tours as well. So then you kind of get a different look at the Fed, and he can still tell you about monetary policy, but he'll be able to tell you things that are going on in the building right now that I could tell you what they've told me, but I haven't actually been there. So Marcus is excited to talk to students again too. And then if you go on there, you could see those are, that is from Chicago, the $1 million bubble that you can take your picture with if you are able to go to Chicago some year in the future, since I'm not real sure that the end of the year trips this year are going to happen. So unless you have, if you have any questions, feel free to email me, or as they pop up as we present, we can go over those as well. So thank you, and I will turn it over to the next part of our presentation.
All right, thank you, Katherine. That's definitely a cool new opportunity to bring the Fed in, and you know, I can see those things will probably get booked up pretty quickly. I know for myself, you know, I'd have 5 classes of students that want to try to get in there at some point. Now, if only I could predict what my schedule is going to look like a week from now as we continue to get changes to our schedule.
I understand. So if you have 2 days notice or 1 day, just let me know and we'll try to work that out too. So I understand, because my own daughter's schedule changes every week. So I get it.
Yeah, well, that's great. That's so cool. Glad to see that Chicago Fed is reaching out like that and doing that that new visit. You mentioned Econ Lowdown, and you know that tool that the St. Louis Fed works on and develops. They've got a lot of good resources. If you haven't looked at it, you can filter everything by grade level and by topic. It's a great resource to utilize for not just for teaching about the Federal Reserve, but about anything in an economics course from K, you know, even pre-K up through university level. So great thing to check out if you have not yet. And, you know, I really like also not just using it because you can get little clips and videos and other things there, but creating the teacher account, the actual teacher account online is very valuable. And then you can have your students come on there and do different activities, and you can keep track of it. I use that a lot in the spring when we were asynchronous and synchronous meetings was not a thing, and we were just, okay, give the kids an assignment, give them 2 hours of work a week. And, you know, that was a great thing for me to go and utilize, was the prepackaged, you know, supply and demand 2-hour lesson or hour and a half lesson that guided students through that, since I was really kind of hands tied with our district. Now we're a little bit ahead of schedule because I wasn't really scheduled to start till 4:20. So it does give us a little bit of time if you know, anybody had any just wanting things that they had done cool in the classroom, some interesting things that you guys have done. I'd love to hear what you've done. I mean, going to Meyer and putting the tripod in the cart of the the cart, and I got one thumbs up from my mom. She kind of realized what I was doing. She gave me a thumbs up. I was like, all right, you get it, you know. Other people probably thought I was trying to, you know, become famous on YouTube or something. But it was so perfect that, you know, you didn't even have to have this thing planned. You just kind of walk around the store, and at the end cap of the aisle, they had the ragu pasta sauce, they had the Parmesan cheese, and they had the spaghetti. And the only thing that was on sale was the ragu pasta sauce. It was like you buy 5, you get them for 55 cents each or something like that. And so I just showed my camera there. I'm like, oh, look at this, that ragu pasta sauce. And here's a complimentary good, the Parmesan cheese and the spaghetti noodles that they had right there. And it was just an introduction before I got into the, you know, the more boring stuff of the graphs and things of that nature. So that was kind of a cool thing that I did. This is another cool opportunity to utilize it for your classroom. What else have people been doing out there?
Spaghetti?
Hey, Derek, it's Stan Masters.
Hi, Stan.
Hey, I wrote a short little focused inquiry around the shape of recessions. I got the ideas from Next Gen Personal Finance and then kind of rolled it into a IDM that you could do in about a week. Using, again, some of the resources that are out there at the Fed site, Minneapolis and so forth. And in the end, they have to kind of predict what this particular COVID-19 recession might look like. In terms of its
recession or recovery, or just the recession?
Yeah, the recessions. Yep. So the Fed, Minneapolis had some good data sets for that. And then the idea is that they would go and then conduct a survey with the community members at different age groups and so forth about how long they think it's going to last in terms of the recession, how severe it's going to be.
You could even have kids like just taking it to that next step and say, what do you think the recovery would look like, to get them to, you know, give some hypothesis on what that might look like, and maybe introduce them to the different shaped recoveries that are out there, and have them choose one and defend why they think it's going to be that. Yeah,
those are going to be part of those formative pieces before they get to their summative task. Yep.
Great. Is that something that other teachers would be able to utilize? Is that available anywhere for them? Is that something I could share?
You know, I wrote it in my closet of my office, so I can certainly share it out and see if they can actually try it out and see how it works in the classroom.
Okay, well, if you share it with me, I can put it in the Google Drive of the documents that we're sharing with everybody today. So I'll do that as soon as I receive it from you and have a minute to get online and pop it in that folder.
Sounds great, thanks.
Yep. Any other things people are doing? I had, and I want to make sure everybody's aware of another resource that's available for the Foundation for Economic Education, fee.org. So it's just FEE.org. They have guest professors that they will have come in and teach your class in a variety of topics. So if you go to fee.org, you can sign up to have a professor come and teach your class on whether it be personal finance or economics topics. I had somebody come in, Signa Thomas. She's associated with Florida State, and she just moved to a new university this past fall here. But she talked about economic systems and the importance of economic freedom, which was pretty cool to, again, what I find with teaching online, with teaching using Microsoft Teams, is that I'm trying to avoid that fatigue, avoid the Zoom fatigue, the Teams fatigue, whatever you want to call it. And the more I can have a different face up in front of the kids and have some variety, it seems to be getting a pretty good response. So fee.org is another place you could go to. I want to hear from other people, but some other things that I think have worked well is I've used Nearpod, and I think that maybe another day we could do a Nearpod whole PD on that, but I've utilized Nearpod, and it's just a way to make your presentations more interactive if the students have a device that they can interact with it. So for instance, I taught demand today, and I was able to upload a graph, or just a basic demand curve, and then give them a situation and say, okay, draw on the graph what's happening to the demand curve based upon the situation. So they have to analyze whether it was shifting to the right, shifting to the left, or moving along, and they would draw that on there. And some other quiz features, polling features that you can build in every couple slides. And what's really helped me do is keep the kids from just joining the class, putting their screen up toward the ceiling like this, and and just disappearing or falling asleep during class or whatever else it happens to be, because they've got something they've got to do every couple of minutes. They've got to stay engaged. Because I know a lot of kids will just get online in other classes and join and, go take a couple hour smoke break, basically. So I've tried to build things like, if I have to have them face to face, that it's going to be a little bit more interactive and they see the point of why we're, synchronous. So Nearpod's NextGen has Nearpod stuff built already for middle school through high school, personal finance. And I know like Jacob Clifford has Nearpods built for a lot of the topics in regular econ. So that's a couple other things that maybe you could put into your tool belt. Anything else? So we got another 4 minutes. If not, we can start early. It's up to you guys. Any other cool things or cool ideas or even little websites or technology hacks you've used? All right, well, if not, we'll go to the next portion of the agenda, which is election lesson demonstration. I don't know how much time we'll have to get into the Halloween card chart, so I'll at least show you that so you can see what it is. Maybe you want to use it on Friday in class, and also the economics live binder of resources. So I think I'll actually start with the economics live binder, and show you that, just so you can see that resource. I don't want to run out of time for that. And then we'll switch over to the election lesson demonstration. I'm going to walk you through that lesson that you could definitely utilize in your class to show the connection between economics and how the economic data might help you predict an election. I think it helps introduce economic indicators and just looking at things through an economic lens or economic perspective. So first of all, the economics live binder this was my COVID project. Let's see, this is not taking me exactly to the live binder. Let's see here. I think I just put a link into the Google Drive folder, but the live binder is at michiganecon.org and /live binders or live binder, sorry. So michiganecon.org /live binder. I'll put that in the chat at some point. And it's kind of embedded in here. You could pull it out and copy this and make it your own if you'd like, or just use it here as a resource. But let's say you're teaching markets, you could click on markets. You could go to the demand tab. It's just, basically set up like a binder. And in the demand tab are a bunch of different resources. It could be an article like How America Became a Nation of Yoga Pants, that sometimes things come up embedded in the bottom. Sometimes they'll not. It kind of depends upon the permissions of the site. It doesn't seem to be coming up. So sometimes it's an article. Sometimes it's a question of the day that is on NextGen that I've pulled off that I think relates back to that topic of demand. It could be a video clip, the Oprah effect, change in demand. So if you want to talk about shifting of the demand, when Oprah says, and I saw she came out with their book list recently. I just saw an article about that last night, that could cause a shift of the demand for this product of We Take the Cake, when Oprah said, it was this great cake. And they go through a nice short video clip on how the business changed for this company when Oprah kind of gave them her stamp of approval. We've got NPR articles and audio clips, some worksheets and other things, Federal Reserve lessons that are in here, Econ EdLink, which is through the Council for Economic Education National lessons as well. So it's just meant for a place to go to. Like, okay, I've got to teach this topic. I've got to teach, let's say monetary policy. That I can go to Federal Reserve tab or fractional reserve banking. You can see the state standards are listed here. You've got some of those I can statements that maybe you struggle with developing that are here that you could just pull from for your lessons. And then click on the Federal Reserve tab, and there's a bunch of different lessons here that you could utilize: lessons, articles, video clips, a bunch of different stuff that you could use for teaching that topic. Okay, so just want to make sure you're aware of that. It's at michiganecon.org/livebinder, and it's mostly secondary. We haven't built it out for elementary yet. Hopefully we don't get a second wave of COVID for me to do that, and it takes a little bit of time to get to that. But there's a lot of things there for you. And if you guys have any questions during while I'm talking, feel free to interact. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask. And I'd love to interact with whatever you want me to, whichever direction you want me to go. But in the folder that is linked on the agenda, it is a Google Drive that you have access to. You can download and make a copy of any of these documents to utilize. There's a folder for the Halloween activity, which I'll look at after we do the economics of the election lesson. And then we've got the article or activity 1 and activities 2 and 3, as well as Martin's tracking the pandemic economy worksheet that he's got in there. So what I want to do, I'm not really going to focus too much on activity 1, but if you have activity 2, this document right here, activity 2, this is something that you could do hands-on as we go through here, and I do the lesson demonstration. Activity 3, we're not really going to do anything with. So if you were looking to print something off, the first 3 pages of activity 2 and 3 would be what we're going to focus on, okay? So I'm going to pull up my presentation here. I just got to find where I have it. I had it open and I don't see it here. So 1 second. All right. Let me just put this in presentation mode for you. And we'll get started. So today we're going to predict the winner of the presidential election. We're going to see if we can be soothsayers here and show our students how smart we are or not. And we've got the economic misery in presidential elections lesson that I'm going to demonstrate. Now, the activity sheets that I have in the folder, because this lesson can be found on the Council for Economic Education website, but the activity sheets have a omission in them, I think in the 80s somewhere. So the sheets that I have in the folder for you are going to be the ones that I would recommend you using if you're using this lesson in your classroom, okay? So first of all, I wanted to share with you guys that CE does have at Econ Ed Link an election economics collection that has 20 some lessons that you could choose from, and you could look into that and see what else is there. You could talk about. Some of them are just related to topics that could come up in election versus this one that's more specific about the election results, okay? So there's a link in the presentation today for you to get to that. So everything that's in this PowerPoint, you'll be able to, you can get the PowerPoint right now from the PDF, or not from the PDF, from the folder, the Google Doc folder that we shared with you in the email that we sent out today. So all these are links that you can get to. The first thing I want to talk about is just predicting an election. What goes into it? What data might we care about, especially from an economic perspective? So, we could pull up the 538 website and say, okay, Biden is favored to win the election. How are they predicting this? What things might they be using? And when you look at and dig into 538, I think it's a lot of polling that they use to predict their election. I think it says it somewhere, and I'm just trying to remember exactly where. Sorry, I'm scrolling a lot because that gets to be a headache. it might not be on that homepage. I thought it was, but it's a lot of polling that they're using to give their election predictions. We're going to do it a little bit differently. We're going to focus on economics to make our prediction. So you can pull that website up to maybe just kind of prime the juices for the lesson. Okay. You could go back to 2016 and look at the presidential election model final report from Moody's Analytics. And Moody's Analytics in 2016 predicted a win from Hillary Clinton. So even these models can get it wrong because we all know that Hillary did not win. But back in 2016, right before the election, they said, you know, this model accurately predicts every presidential election since 1980. They were all confident with it. But it says that its projections are solely a reflection of economic and political conditions upon the incumbent party and do not take any aspects of the individual candidates into account. And kind of similar with what we're going to do today. And they talk a little bit about the risk in their model outcome because of the unusual nature of the election in 2016. They get a little bit more in depth into the economic variables that they're looking at. And they talk about state level economic activity, and they're, you know, more digging into their election model specifications, which you could spend as much or as little time as you want to. You know, but they say that the three economic variables that prove to be most significant in state level voter behavior are 2-year percentage change in real personal income per household, house prices, and gasoline prices. Okay, so that's one of the things that they're utilizing to predict it in their toolkit. So then you could look at the 2020 presidential election model analysis. Now you have to be a paid subscriber to get the most recent update, but they did put a PDF out in September of 2019, which I thought was interesting because it digs a little bit more deep into their different models here. And I think it's just good for you as a background, probably as a teacher, to look at this versus sharing it with the students. And it talks about the economic variables. And the Pocketbook model, they've got different models. The Pocketbook model focuses on the gasoline prices and let's see, the change in house prices and the change in real personal income. And then they have the stock market model that relies on fewer economic variables, but uses corporate profits and some other things. That's the stock market model. And then the unemployment model relies on fewer economic variables, predicted a comfortable win for Trump back in 2019, but includes changes in real incomes, but also state-specific unemployment rates for which state or which way that state would go. Okay, which obviously everything's changed since 2019. So, but it still makes it interesting to see why the models might be having a tough time predicting who's going to win. So I think looking at what they take into account is kind of an important thing if you're going to go this direction with this lesson. All right. The latest prediction from Moody's was, I found it in the July NPR 2020. The headline really jumped out at me. The economy may be losing its impact on presidential elections. And it goes back to something we'll talk about in a moment, that maybe it's not the economy stupid anymore. That the economy, oh, sorry, my dog is deciding it's time to bark. All right, so the economy matters, but you know, how much does it matter? What's the impact? All right, so let's get into the lesson. All right, so jumping ahead to the next slide, gives you a link to the Econ Ed Link site where you can find the lesson. But again, like I said, the resources that you should use would be the ones in the folder that I've shared. And if you don't have that, I will put the link again in our chat. All right, so here's what the students are going to do. And just for sake of time purposes, I want to kind of move fast through some portions of this. So the first thing in the activity would be, and you could eliminate this if you don't want to do it, but they would ask an adult, what do they feel are the most important issues in the presidential election? You know, see if economic issues are a concern, if it's more social issues, and so on. And that might provide a good discussion as to how good this model might end up being. All right, so we got spring of 1992. James Carville said, the kind of three things that there were guiding principles in the election for Bill Clinton. And one of them was the economy, stupid, it's the economy. And focusing on the fact that we had a recession in 1991 under George Bush being president. So he kind of focused in on that. So like I said, this lesson does teach economic indicators. Unemployment rates defined here, inflation rate, and real GDP. And then a couple of statistics that we're going to look at: the misery index, which is just the sum of the unemployment rate and the inflation rate. So misery index would be really miserable if you had a high unemployment rate, a lot of people out of work, and a high inflation rate. That'd be a really bad situation. So the other thing would be growth rate in real GDP per capita. How much is the economy growing per person? All right, so what we're going to try to do is come up with economic rules that might guide election results. So a real GDP per capita growth rule, you could say, okay, the incumbent party usually wins if the growth rate of real GDP per capita is greater than 0% during the year of the election. You don't see a real correlation between that and the results, okay? So that would not be a good rule. Some rules that, work a little bit better. If the growth rate is accelerating in the election year than the previous year, the incumbent party usually wins. Or the incumbent party usually wins if the misery index is not increased from the year prior to the election. Or a guaranteed loss rule, if the GDP per capita growth is decelerating, so it's the economy is slowing down in the election year, and the misery index has increased from the year prior to the election, to now. All right, so we'll focus a lot on an incumbent party, which party was in the presidential seat before this election, or when this election is happening, okay? So if you have the activity 2 sheet, now this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna get into this, and we're going to start to identify who the candidates were, the incumbent party, whether it's a win or a loss, okay? So election 1960, we've got Kennedy versus Nixon. So I wasn't around back then. I don't want to call anybody out who might have been around. But Stan, I feel comfortable calling on you because I know that you've seen me do this before, and I'm going to put you on the spot and say, 1960, who is the incumbent party in 1960?
That would be the Republicans under Eisenhower.
That's correct. That is correct. And then who won that election, though?
The Democrats won. John F. Kennedy.
John F. Kennedy, that's correct. So the Democrats won that election. So just going kind of back a slide, what we're doing is going through 1960 on that, the first kind of blank lines there, and we have Kennedy and Nixon. You would circle the candidate who won, which would be Kennedy, and the incumbent party wins or loses. It would be a loss, or an L, for the incumbent party. So we're doing the final 2 columns there of this activity 2, okay? So we go through all the elections. 1960, 1964, we had the Democrats because Kennedy won, and then LBJ wins in 1964. Once we get into the 70s, I'm going to start calling on people because then I know you're my age or younger, and I know I'm not going to offend you at that point. So I'll go through the 60s though. All right, so LBJ winning in 1964 with the Democrats being the incumbent party, so it's a win for the incumbent party. All right, 1968, it was a loss for the incumbent party as Nixon won the election in 68 for the Republicans. And then 1972, again, win for the incumbent party, and Nixon again in 72. So we're marking those final 2 columns in the activity 2. All right. So I'm going to start to pick on some people here. Let's go with low-hanging fruit first. Michelle, you know you're low-hanging fruit for me because you're in my district. All right. So 1976, you're near my age, I'm sure, right? So I don't know if you were alive for this election or not, but the incumbent party and who won that election?
Carter won.
Oh,
Carter won. What was the incumbent party at the time though?
Oh, the incumbents are the Republicans. So
Yeah.
they lost.
Yep. So it was a loss for the incumbent party, and Carter won the election. Very good. All right. Let's go to 1980. All right. Adam, with the best background of the day, I'm going to ask you for the incumbent party and the winner of the 1980 election.
This is good. I was born in 1980. So the Democrats were the incumbent party, and the winner of the election was Reagan, the Republican.
So a loss for the incumbent party and a win for Reagan. All right. In 1984, Maxine, who won the 1984 election? Maxine, can you unmute yourself so I can hear your beautiful voice? Oh, she's a robot. Your voice is robotic. I can't hear it. Darn it. Sorry, I can't understand that. Dan, can you help her out, Dan Mumbrew?
The answer to the chat.
What was that?
She answered in the chat.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I got too many things going on here and I don't have the chat open.
We know Mondale lost, so it was Reagan.
We know Reagan won, right?
Reagan won 8.
Yeah. So Mondale won one state, I think, in that 1984 election. Any bonus points for if you know what state it was that Mondale won?
Minnesota.
Minnesota, yes, his home state of Minnesota. All right. And then the next one, 1988. Well, oh, sorry, that's the next slide because of the next page. So I kind of paused here so we could, just kind of check your sheet for our winners and whether it was a win for the incumbent party or not. So Reagan and a win for the incumbent party in 1984. So just a little check for your sheet there. That's what, the students would have.
Pretty even.
Yeah. Things seem to balance out in life, don't they, over time? 1988 is where we're going to start, okay? So 1988, you guys, I had to include that picture, right? So extra credit, bonus point, if you can name the city where that picture of Mike Dukakis was taken.
Warren.
Incorrect. That's what I thought until I looked it up. Right, the Warren tank plant. That's what I thought. I really had to look this up like a couple of weeks ago because I thought it was Warren. No guesses. It's close to Warren. I'm in that city right now. It's north of Warren. General Dynamics is where it was at. Sterling Heights.
Heights. I was just going to say Sterling Heights.
Yeah, Sterling Heights, Michigan is where that photo was taken. One of the what is the rule now? Never put your candidate in a hat. But Trump has gotten away with that. So, but yet the hats are always a controversy, aren't they? So we've got Mike Dukakis that was obviously the loser in 1988 to George Bush. So incumbent party win, George Bush win. It takes us to 1992, which was definitely a different election with the giant sucking sound that came. No, that wasn't from the election. That was NAFTA, right? With Ross Perot involved. But let me see who else we've got here. Hi, Jen. Jen Morris, can you tell me who won the 1992 election? Because this was the first one I got to vote in. So this is a special election to me. Who won the 1992 election?
The 92 election was Clinton.
Absolutely. Bill Clinton won in 1992 as a Democrat. So it was a loss for the incumbent party and a win for Clinton. And then 1996, this is the portion of the slideshow where I start to think of the candidates in their, not necessarily the candidates, but their Saturday Night Live people who played the candidate. I almost remember better than the candidate themselves because I don't know. I like Saturday Night Live better than the real news, I suppose. So 1996, who won that election? Let's go with David. Can you tell me who won that 1996 election, Battistelli?
Bill Clinton.
Bill Clinton. So a win for the incumbent party.
Nice job with the last name.
I've got a vowel on my end of my last name too. I've got to say it right. So 2000. Not sure if this election's over yet. I think it still might be going on. But look at Al Gore. Look at how young he looked. Wow. That was probably a photo taken in like October, and then every other picture I remember of him is after November. So who won the 2000 election? Jackie Dunlap, can you tell me who won that 2000 election?
Wrong thing. Bush.
Bush won the 2000 election. So it was a loss for the incumbent party. Yes. Absolutely. Sorry, I just got to do a quick mute here. All right. So a win for George Bush or George W. Bush. And then 2004, I just want to make sure we've got time for everything. So I'll do a couple of these here. A win for the incumbent party and another George Bush win there. And 2008, Barack Obama and Senator McCain from Arizona would have been a loss for the incumbent party and a win for Barack Obama. 2012, win for the incumbent party and a Barack Obama win again in 2012. And so this is what your sheet would look like after page 2. It's amazing when you step back and just look at that, right? The win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, win. It's like we can never make us our people happy, right? Just one thing is always change and hope, right? Run on change and hope. 2016, we get Donald Trump winning. So a loss for the incumbent party and a win for Trump. All right, so that takes us to our last page right there. All right. So after you've identified that first step, can again focus back on those economics of what we're doing, get kind of out of the history discussion and some of the stories that come out of there. I like to talk about 1988 when our school district let us go out of, like they ended school early so that we could go to Stevenson High School, where President Reagan was flying in on Marine One on his helicopter, landing right there at the football field. I think he actually landed on the baseball field and spoke at the football field. And they let the school out early so they could go see the president, which, I don't think we'd ever see those days again. But it was definitely something that stuck with me. It was a good experience for me, whether, Democrat or Republican at the time. Was just a good experience to understand politics a little bit more and have a discussion about it. So that was one of my first kind of interesting political memories from 1988 when that election was going on and he was helping campaign for George Bush. But we get into the economics of it now. So you start talking about the economics and a real GDP per capita growth rule. The incumbent party usually wins if the growth rate of real GDP per capita is greater than 0% during the year of the election. Is not a good rule. We don't see that, like I said earlier, a correlation there, right? So what we do see, like I mentioned earlier, are these ones here. So this is what we're going to look at. So now we look at those activity 2 marked up worksheets and we're going to apply those rules. So looking at the data, we look at the real GDP per capita growth rule. So we're going to be marking up that the column where it says real GDP per capita growth rule by looking at the growth in real GDP per capita in percentage. All right. Now, in 1959, it was 5.1. In 1960, it was 0.5. So it's decreasing. So we would put you know, the down arrow there, and then we see the misery index going up from 6.4 in 59 to 7.0 in 1960. So that's going to be predicting a loss by the incumbent party. Okay, so we're trying to see, is there a prediction here that we can get from this misery index? Okay, then we look at 1963 to 1964, and we're looking at the data. GDP per capita is increasing. The misery index is getting better because it's a lower number. It should predict a win for the incumbent party with those things going on. And you know, that's indeed what did happen. 67 to 68, 1.6 to 3.9. So we see an increase in the growth in real GDP per capita, as well as the misery index going up there. You know, so the real GDP per capita growth rule, that rule says that it should be a win for the incumbent party, whereas misery index rule would predict a loss. So this is one where it kind of differs a little bit. But what did really happen? Well, it was a loss. So this is where you start to differentiate a little bit, like, oh, okay, maybe the misery index rule is a little bit better predictor than the just growth in real GDP per capita rule. So we continue on. I don't need to go through every single election, but I'll do a couple more and then we'll skip to the next page. But from 71 to 72, you can see the increase in growth in real GDP per capita increasing. So you'd put a W there, that would predict a win. The misery index rule is getting better because the number is lower. So that would predict a win with the misery index rule. And then in 75 to 76.
On me? Let me make sure.
Sorry, hold on, I need to mute again. If you guys aren't muted and have some background noise going on, it'd be great if you mute yourself, but I'm gonna mute everybody for a second, then you can unmute yourself if you need to speak. I definitely want you to speak up if you have any questions. But all right. One sec, I see a hand raised, but I'm busy trying to mute everybody again. It's beautiful piano lessons though. All right. Okay, so we had a hand raised.
Derek, I was using my family's iPad, and so I changed my name. So
Oh,
I just
okay.
you didn't know. Okay.
Thank you.
It's Allison.
Thank you.
Okay.
Gotcha. I see it. All right. So that's the slides right there for finishing it out. You can see it again. You're looking for the real GDP per capita. You're looking at that first column of data. For the misery index rule, you're looking at the last column of data. And again, if it's increasing for GDP per capita, you'll see predicting a win for the incumbent party, and the misery index predicting if it's going down, predicting a win for the incumbent party. All right, so going on to the next slide, it just goes through the next elections all the way up to 2012. And you can see the predictions here. Again, win, win, win in 1988, where 1992 is a little bit of a different thing, where neither of the rules worked with what actually happened. But 1992, we all know there was a third party involved that kind of got a little skewed the results a bit than what we normally see with a two-party vote. So the incumbent party lost, despite the fact that both indicators predicted an incumbent party win. We see, though, along the lines all the way across there, the rest of the page, both rules are good predictors of what's going on with the election results. And for 2016, the data did hold true. There was decreasing GDP growth rate per capita and an increasing misery index, which would have predicted a loss for the incumbent party. And that's indeed what did happen. All right, so what we end up seeing is, we want to look at how many times did each of the rules work, what years did it not work, and maybe explain why, that happened. So if we went backward and we look, okay, 2016, everything worked, right? We talked about, I'm going backwards in the slideshow in case, just so you understand the navigation. 1992 being the only one that things didn't work on that page. Going from 1960 to 1984, the only other one where we don't see it working would be 1976 for the misery index, right? So there's just 2 elections that it doesn't work, the misery index doesn't work for. Because again, 1976, a lot of weird things going on politically there, obviously with Nixon and Ford being not really an elected president sitting in office at the election time, as well as the high inflation, which might be a good chance for you guys to talk about inflation. And again, where it's a good chance for you to introduce economic indicators, maybe even before you get to that chapter. All right, so let's get into what we see for the 2020 election, right? So we want to predict the next election. We look at the 2019 data and we want to compare it to the 2020 data. So 2019 data, we've got 1.8% real GDP per capita growth rate, misery index in 2019, very low, 5.5, the second lowest annual misery index since 1957, okay? So that's gonna make it hard to make that one go down and have the misery index be an improvement. All right, so what we see, Biden-Harris there, and going into the data, GDP per capita going from a growth rate of 1.8 down to a negative 9.98. The misery index going from 5.5 to 11.2, that increasing, and those are the data points that we would say predicts a Biden-Harris win. It's looking at the predictions back to 1960. It seems like a fairly solid stance to say that the economic data points to a Biden win. Now, could we end up looking back at this as being like, well, this was a weird year because of COVID, and so of course the numbers were bad and other things took precedence? Yeah, possibly, but this is part of the fun of it right now. If you wanted to, and you could expand this lesson as well. You could not just use it to predict presidential elections, but you could use this to predict maybe there's a tie to the Michigan governor election. So you can go and customize your data sets and get a lot more data at the Federal Reserve Economic Data website, FRED, and I've got some links for you here. And you could look and see maybe Michigan specific data. What's going on with Michigan GDP per capita growth rate? What's going on with the misery index in Michigan? And does that predict the incumbent party winning the governorship? Or maybe with Congress, maybe you could look at the midterm elections and see if there's any correlation. I haven't done that myself yet, so it'd be kind of cool to see if there is anything, if you wanted to expand this a bit. All right. Some other possible resources of interest. There's some books on this I wanted to share with you guys. Economics and Elections, the Major Western Democracies. So there's a link to that on Amazon. An interesting article from NPR about how Donald Trump could benefit in November from a bad economy. The Economics of Voting, Econ EdLink webinar, and Does the Economy Affect Elections Anymore? Economist article, just talking about to what extent, is the economy becoming less important in elections, was kind of the focus of that article, okay? So before I get into the Halloween card sharks lesson demonstration with the last 7 minutes that we've got, do you have any questions on the economics of the elections lesson that we just did?
I enjoyed it. It was very good.
Good. Thanks. I mean, we want to obviously give you something that you could utilize in your classroom tomorrow.
It's very timely and helpful.
Good. Well, we want to try to help you plan another day too. So that's what we'll get into with the Halloween card sharks. If you are interested in.
Definitely a trip down memory lane. I know that much.
Yeah, I think everybody's got, you know, like I said, those little stories and little tidbits that they like to talk about. This is their first election they got to vote in, or interesting things they might remember, or connections they might have to things going on.
My husband went to bed on the last one and woke up the next morning and thought I was fibbing and teasing him. And then he got in the car and drove to work. He's like, "You really were telling the truth." I'm like, "Whatever, honey." Whatever,
I remember that. I remember that feeling.
I know, I think a lot of people went through that.
I think it was one of those things like, I was so convinced that my last child was going to be a girl that I called him her and didn't even like care to find out whether it was a boy or a girl. And then I found out it was a boy and I was like surprised. And it was, I think, the same kind of feeling in 2016, where I think I went to sleep just assuming Hillary won. And then I was driving to work and found out Trump won. And I remember I was like coming up to 23 Mile in Van Dyke and I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think that that was possible. Okay. All right, well, let's focus on this next little bit, the next 5 minutes, on a quick demonstration of this Halloween Card Sharks lesson. And this is in the Google folder for you. If you'd like to use it in class, feel free to download it, use whatever part you'd like. Sorry, I'm just gonna have to open it up from that folder. I'll just click on the link. That'll be easiest for me, I think. All right, so the Halloween Card Sharks is in the Halloween activity folder of the Teacher Night at the Fed folder within the Google Drive. And there's a student like worksheet that they would use that they could, you know, type in or write in, depending on your situation, if you're virtual or face-to-face. And all they're really doing during this process is it's some economic statistics. And if you've ever seen the kind of the first round of Card Sharks, the first part of Card Sharks before they start flipping the cards, they give a statistic and somebody's got to guess the statistic, and then the other person guesses higher or lower. So I have one person in class decide, or one table in class decide what the answer is to the statistic, and then everybody else can guess higher or lower. So they circle higher or lower, and then they get a point if they were right with their guess. So let me pull up the presentation here, and I'm going to download it very quickly because otherwise it's going to be a little mishmash here. All right, so let me just make sure that I can show you guys this, and we'll be good to go and get started to just do a quick demonstration. All right. So this is data taken from a September 1st to 9th, 2020 National Retail Federation survey. And I just explained how you play the game. So there are some instructions there if you'd like to use that, but feel free to customize this however you'd like. It might be a little loud. There is some audio with it. So just please be aware, make sure your volume's down, because there'll be some audio in a second. So the first question I'd ask, like, how many million Americans plan to celebrate Halloween this year? All right. Katherine, can you guess for me how many million Americans plan to celebrate Halloween this year?
I'm going to go with 5 million.
Okay, so Katherine's guess is 5 million. Everybody else would circle higher or lower on their sheet, higher or lower than 5 million. And then you'd show the answer, which was 148 million. There's some little audio with it. That was a little, like a half second too long on the screen, I think. So it's 20 questions like that. You can shorten it up to 10 if you'd like. If you just want to do something short and quick in class, you want to use the whole thing, feel free. What % of consumers will go to a specialty Halloween or costume store? 32%. And so it brings up some, personal finance. You can talk about elasticity. You can talk about demand and shifting demand, because there's questions like, okay, what % of people are going to dress up their pets? And maybe how that's changed over time. What % of consumers will buy their Halloween purchases online? and so on. All right. I'm not going to go through all the questions. I just wanted to demonstrate that to you. What percentage of people will hand out candy this year? 62%. So that's what the lesson would be. All right. And at the very end, it's kind of a neat part that I do want to jump to. What I did was say, okay, your turn right now, and it's just an idea of how you could use it. Your turn right now could turn into extra credit points, or your score right now, or you could risk them by playing card sharks. So it teaches kids a little bit of risk, right? Maybe you're teaching insurance. You want to teach them about risk. If they'll have to make it through all the cards without getting anything wrong, we'll double their extra credit. If they get one wrong, they lose all their extra credit. And just I have a little bit of a process in how I do it face to face, so that I know who's playing. So it teaches their willingness to bear risk. All right, so the Card Sharks link here would jump you to a website, just a really quick and easy to use website, where you could choose. I usually go with 4 cards, and I have a full deck, and I sit play, and I'm like, okay, everybody who's playing, you've got an 8, higher or lower, and it doesn't matter what you hit here because you just want to show the next card. And kids might say lower. King, you lost, sit down, you don't get any extra credit. And anybody who got it right could keep playing. Lower, nope, sorry, King, it's a tie, it wasn't lower. Everybody at that point, who probably played is going to lose their extra credit. So it's a good opportunity to show them risk. All right, so I am 1 minute over. I apologize, Martin, but that's just another lesson that you could utilize, and hopefully you'll have some fun with that in class. It's always a fun day to do that in class. I'm looking forward to doing that in my class on Friday, even virtually. You can do it virtually. You can do it face to face. I don't think that it really changes much at all. You saw how I did it with Katherine. So, any questions before I hand it off to Martin? Hopefully all the questions will be like, where do I find this? How do I get it? That we've already answered for you. And I'll put links in the chat and things while Martin's speaking. So Martin, thanks for giving me an extra couple minutes there.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks, Derek. Hello, my friends. I hope you are all well and safe and healthy. I'm coming to you from my guest bedroom, where we haven't had many guests since the pandemic started. I just hope you're doing well, your families are doing well. Just keep hanging in there. I think we're all taking this one day at a time and doing the best we can. So I've got 30 minutes, and I've got probably too much I'm going to try to do, but I'm going to do my best here. Before I start, I'm going to make some comments about the economy. So just as a reminder, and for those who this is their first time, whenever I talk about the economy, they're my views, they're my opinions, and they don't necessarily represent those of the Federal Reserve System or anyone else that works for the Fed in Detroit. Arguably the biggest change to my workload since the pandemic started is we need to get information quickly, and we need to get it quicker than that. For those most of you that have attended our teacher nights before, but for our first timers, a lot of my work goes into putting together our beige book report. That's the Fed's report on current business conditions. It comes out every 6 weeks. Basically from mid-March through the end of June, really, I basically did a beige book report, like what my regular load would be every week. So for about 14 straight weeks. The statistical data we get that comes out every month, like the unemployment rate, the inflation rate, housing statistics, vehicle sales, by the time those would come out for describing what happened in the previous month, that would be outdated information. We need to get information that happens basically every week, every 2 weeks. So we have invested and tracked what are called high frequency data indicators, data that comes out daily, weekly. While we follow these in normal times, we don't put a lot of weight on them in normal times because those data can be pretty volatile. One day consumer spending could be way up, and then the next day maybe it falls back. That's why usually monthly data, quarterly data are more accepted. But we need to get information quickly, and so we've invested more into those. And I'd like to show you one of those in detail, and that's what the worksheet that I put together that hopefully I will be able to describe for you well enough you'll be comfortable then using it with your students in your classroom. So I'm going to share my screen and hopefully successfully walk you through this. Okay, so if you could go to the website up here, I'm going to highlight it. And so it's track the recovery, that's all one word, .org. And while you do that, I'll tell you that in addition to looking at these high frequency data indicators more often, we've also stepped up how often we talk with our business roundtables. Now, we're not allowed to meet with them in person. That travel's been canceled for the time being and for the foreseeable future. So we've been meeting with them first audio conference call, video conference call, and more often than what we would normally in a given year. Normally we do 2 to 3 roundtables a year with particular groups. We're double that with some of our groups. Just again, the need to get information quickly to try and analyze and figure out what might be the next step and what happens with the economy. All right, so hopefully you are at the website, and if you hear banging behind me, the boys are home from childcare. They're trying to get in, but the door's locked. They're not happy. So let's start off with, so what you're looking at is high frequency data put together by Harvard, Brown University, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Maybe more importantly, this is also the product of a paper co-authored by a gentleman named Raj Chetty. So if you're wondering about the credibility of the data, Raj Chetty would basically be a first team all academic author, arguably, for the work he's done. Now, if you're wondering what you're looking at, so we're looking at consumer spending right now. If you're wondering what you're looking at, you can hover your mouse over the little eye with the circle. What we're looking at is the change in average consumer credit and debit card spending. So millions upon millions of credit and debit card transactions that were indexed to, index so we could compare where consumer spending is now with where it was pre-pandemic, while accounting for normal seasonal fluctuations. Okay. Now, the great thing about this website is that it will tell you also what you're looking at. So let's, if you have your mouse, let's click on national. Okay. And I'm going to then click on total down here. And I'm going to unclick my income tab. So hopefully you are looking at a graph that just looks at the percentage change in United States consumer spending. Another nice thing about this website is it shows you like particular days. So when was the first COVID case? When was the national emergency declared? When was the CARES Act passed? And when stimulus payments from the CARES Act were sent out to begin with. This data comes out daily. except for the last month or so. Then it comes out every week or so. But the great thing about this is it tells you what the graph says. So in the United States, as of September 20th, total spending by all consumers was down 4% compared to January. Okay, and that's what the graph shows. And even then, if we go a little more recently, which would be what you would put in the table. Now, I put a spot where you would put the most recent day because the data comes out so frequently, you can do this on a weekly basis and see how things change. So if you look at the week ending October 11th, so just 2 weeks ago, consumer spending nationally was still down just under 4%, 3.7%. Okay, so you would put that in the first box in the table on your worksheet, that U.S. consumer spending was a negative 3.7. Now, I want to compare how Michigan's doing with the U.S. You can compare state by state what's going on. So I want to compare geographies. So I'm going to click on geographies, and I'm going to click on Michigan. The graph changes to Michigan. And again, the graph tells you what is going on. In Michigan, as of September 20th, total consumer spending is up 12.5% compared to January. Amazing to think about in a way. And again, the graph has a lot of the pertinent dates of Michigan, important dates as the pandemic has progressed. When did public schools close? When did all non-essential businesses close? When was the stay-at-home order enacted? When did businesses start to reopen? And so forth. Again, we can go a little further as to, again, when the most recent data point was. And so in your table, you would put a positive 12.3%. The week ending October 11th, consumer spending in Michigan was up 12.3%. If I want to put Michigan and the U.S. on the same graph, come up here where it says show national figures, and now I've got both of them up on the same graph. If you want to download the picture, you've got a nice easy click to download the chart, and it'll download the chart for you. So in the last column, I have who's doing better. We are. Michigan's doing better. Now let's go below the table for a minute and let's try and figure out where is the strength in Michigan consumer spending. So I'm going to uncheck the show national figures, and I'm going to now go. You can click. They have select industries singled out to where you can check. So first let's go down the line. Let's look at entertainment and recreation. So this would be going to sporting events, museums, attractions, okay? So if we look in Michigan, now that category by itself is down 21.7% versus pre-pandemic. So while again, we've come off the bottom from where it was, when everything was shut down, we're not above pre-pandemic spending. And again, this is adjusted for seasonal fluctuations, given everything that goes on in a normal year. So that's definitely not a strength. We'll see if that's the weakest sector though. Now the next sector is grocery. Let's look at grocery. We know grocery probably performed pretty well during the shutdown. If we look at grocery, we see that grocery is still up 17.5% pre-pandemic. So a lot of grocery shopping or shopping at grocery stores is still occurring. Not like it was if we go back, during April, May, when we were stocking up on toilet paper, paper towels, hand sanitizer, Lysol wipes. It's not up by that much, but it's still up, quite a bit. So definitely still an area of strength. Let's go down to healthcare. Now, this spending on healthcare would be spending on outpatient surgeries, going to the dentist, taking your pet to the vet. So that spending is still well below where it was pre-pandemic, almost 27.5%. Definitely an area of weakness. Some of you know my wife is a nurse in the Trinity Health System. They saw demand come back. Like here, we saw in July, demand for healthcare services came back and was actually up versus before the pandemic, but demand has fallen off. And remember that if you are going in for COVID treatment, that's not a moneymaker for a hospital system. Is that the weakest sector though? Let's go to the next one. That's restaurants and hotels. We know this has been incredibly weak nationally, but look in Michigan. So one of the areas where we are vastly outperforming what's going on nationally, spending at restaurants and hotels is only down 5.7% versus pre-pandemic. So even with restaurant capacity limits, maybe some caution and traveling, spending at restaurants and hotels has hung in there pretty well. We actually spent some time at a couple hotels over the summer on the west side of the state, masking up and taking all the proper precautions. And it was interesting that on the weekends, hotels were pretty full. During the week, because of the lack of business travel and the lack of summer festivals, that's when hotel occupancy was down. So restaurants and hotels have hung in there. Now let's look at general retail. So this would be everything else we haven't talked about. Buying vehicles, buying furniture, buying appliances, buying electronics, buying bouncy houses for your kids because you wanted them to stay at home. If we look at that, this is buying boats, buying jet skis. This is everything else. This is where the strength is. Versus pre-pandemic, spending is up 27% in Michigan. Okay, and again, if you look, another thing you can do is you see all the different states abbreviated over here. You can compare like a heat map, and Michigan fares pretty well in this category. If I were to go back and we were to look at consumer spending just as a whole, Michigan has the highest gain in consumer spending versus pre-pandemic of all the states in the U.S. So retail is where the strength is. The weakest category is transportation. So this is basically flying, airlines, going on the train, using going on the bus. Spending is still 37% below pre-pandemic. Think about what's going on with the airlines and how many flights they've cut, how many people they've laid off. So in that question below the table where I ask, which Michigan consumer spending category has seen the strongest recovery? So that's general retail. And that's your spending on, according to the website. So that's, again, spending on vehicles, furniture, appliances, electronics, toys. So that general retail category is where the strongest recovery has come in consumer spending. The weakest recovery is in transportation. Still down almost 40% versus pre-pandemic. All right, so we go down to the next line of the table. We'll look at the number of small businesses open, which is one of the other things we can click on. So let's go to small businesses open. And let's look at, so Michigan comes up first. This is one area we're worried about. I'm worried about. The longer the pandemic progresses, the harder the time small businesses are going to have, especially, the later we go in delaying a second COVID relief package coming out of Washington. So versus pre-pandemic, what this chart says is, and again, it says it right for you, which is nice. The number of small businesses open is down almost 27.9% compared to January. Now, how does that, so that negative 27.9 would go in your table under Michigan. I can put the US on the same chart. So again, I go up here and show national figures. So the last data point we have, small business, the number of small businesses open is down 24.1% nationally compared to pre-pandemic. So here we're not doing better than what's going on in the US. So while consumer spending is vastly outperforming the US as far as consumer spending goes, as far as small businesses go, we're behind. So now below the table, which Michigan category of small businesses has seen the strongest recovery and which one has seen the weakest recovery? So we can break it down into 3 different categories back on the website. So let's look at, we'll get rid of the national figures. Let's go to education and healthcare. So what would a small business in this category look like? This would be your physical therapy small business that you see in maybe in a strip mall. Your vet, your dentist, your eye doctor. I know my dentist just recently reopened. They put in a new filtration system so they could, clean the air better. So in that category, we still have 24% fewer small businesses open versus pre-pandemic. So that's actually done a little better than the state as a whole. How about leisure and hospitality? So this would be all of your leisure and hospitality rolled into one. This would be restaurants, hotels, museums. This is where the weakness is. The number of leisure and hospitality small businesses open down 41% compared to January 2020. So even though spending in some of those categories has hung in there, the number of small businesses has dropped. And we think about restaurants specifically. The Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association, in a recent survey, still feels that 30 to 40% of restaurants will not survive the pandemic. One thing we've learned is that restaurants need the equivalent of 75% occupancy, so the same amount of money, whether now it's curbside pickup, takeout, eating outside. They still need 75% of normal revenue to make it, and that's going to be hard for a lot of them. Hotels, it's going to be the same kind of deal. Many are not close to hitting the occupancy rate that would allow them to break even. So that sector is going to have a difficult time again, unless maybe some additional relief comes their way. The last category, so retail shops and transportation, better relatively speaking, but still 21% fewer small businesses open at this point. So if we go back to the worksheet, which category of small businesses has seen the strongest recovery according to the website? It's retail and transportation. Which category has seen the weakest? It's leisure and hospitality. Okay. All right, the next line, let's look at employment. So we go back to, and again, if you wonder where the data comes from, you go to the I in the small circle. So with small businesses, it's collected by another website that tracks that specifically. We go to employment, so back up to the back up here. We click on employment, and so Michigan. We've still got Michigan highlighted, so Michigan comes up. And so now with employment, the state data is a little further behind. They're going by the monthly data that comes out. So this data is a little further behind on the state level. So if we look at Michigan in September, employment was still down 7% versus pre-pandemic. So in the table, you would put -7 under Michigan in the employment row. If we look at, we put the US on the same chart so we can compare. At the same point in time, the US was down 7.5%, but we have a little more data for what's going on nationally. So it's actually improved to employment being down 6.7% versus pre-pandemic. So depending on how you want to fill the table, you can either put negative 7.5, where US unemployment, since that's where the last data point we have for both, but the US most recent data point, it's actually a little better at negative 6.7. Now, the next questions below the table talk about which income group has made a stronger or weaker recovery. So a term often thrown out, especially with the election and the pandemic, is this K-shaped recovery that people talk about. The K-shaped recovery is you have one group of people, one group of businesses doing very well. You have another group of people that are falling further behind. You can divide this arguably between those businesses deemed essential versus non-essential. We're also seeing it, hearing it anecdotally between higher wage, higher skilled, and lower wage, lower skilled workers. Let's see if this chart plays it out as well. So I'm going to look at employment by income group, and let's look at nationally because we have more. Actually, we'll stay with Michigan since I have that on the worksheet. So let's look at Michigan employment by income group. So we come down to income. Let's get rid of the national figures first. So we come down to income, and this is median household income by zip code. That's where this data comes from. So if you look at low income zip codes, employment, the most recent data we have is down 22%. So much worse than what's going on statewide. So right there you have some sign of that K-shaped recovery. We look at middle income jobs or employment held by people in middle income zip codes. Look at how much better that is, only down 2.6% versus pre-pandemic in Michigan. If we look at higher income zip codes, you would imagine this would be better than that. Sure. And it is, so not by much. It's though higher, 2.4% above pre-pandemic. So if we go back to the worksheet just by income, which income group has seen the strongest recovery? Be the higher income group, higher income zip codes. Which Michigan income group has seen the weakest recovery? You would say the lower income zip codes. But we can look at income group and how they're spending money. Let's go back to consumer spending. So back up at the top. Let's look at consumer spending by income group. So we come down here. So let's look at consumer spending in low income zip codes. Look at this.
Oh my.
Not only is it positive, but until the last couple of weeks, it was outperforming the state as a whole. So, one thing we're curious about is with the elimination of that extra $600 people received if they decided to file for unemployment insurance, is, if their consumer spending habits would change. And what this graph says, no, maybe here's a dip in late August, but it came right back over Labor Day. Then we had another dip right after school started, but then we had an upward trend again until just again the last couple of weeks. So consumer spending in lower income zip codes is up almost 12% versus pre-pandemic. Now, let's see if that's, now, if this has any correlation with what's going on with employment, let's see what's going on with the other income groups. So let's go to middle income. Middle income, positive, but not as positive. It's still up considerably. Consumer spending in middle income zip codes is up 10.5% versus pre-pandemic, but being outperformed slightly by the lower income zip codes. Let's look at the higher income zip codes. Let's see what consumer spending is like there. And not surprisingly, it is the most positive, almost up 20% versus pre-pandemic. But if I were to compare the different income categories, look what's happened over time. So if I click on compare subcategories, then I can add multiple data series to the graph. So I have all the income groups on at the same time. Look at until Labor Day weekend, consumer spending in lower income zip codes outperformed everybody in Michigan. Again, only until recent weeks did higher income spending in higher income zip codes, take the lead, which is what you might expect. So, if I go back to this worksheet, which Michigan income group has seen the strongest recovery? Well, in employment, it's higher income groups. In consumer spending, it's now higher income groups as well, higher income zip codes, sorry. But for the majority of the recoveries, at least so far, it's been the strongest recovery in consumer spending was lower income zip codes. Which Michigan income group has seen the weakest recovery? So in employment, it's, again, lower income zip codes. But in consumer spending, it's actually middle income zip codes. So not necessarily the clearer picture of which income group is doing better statewide. Now, maybe it becomes clearer here as the year ends up and we see where we're at, but we'll see about that. All right.
Hey, Martin,
very quickly.
Before you change that slide, Darcy Moss out in the field here. How do you cross-check that against credit card debt or consumer debt? Are they spending or are they getting in debt?
So one interesting thing about early in the recovery is that we actually saw the amount of credit debt basically come down in the first couple months. Now it has started to go back up in recent months, but at first people actually were paying down their debt.
That's good to hear. Stimulus was used right. That's good.
So now we'll see where we're at, as this goes on. But at first, yeah, consumer credit debt actually was coming down a little bit.
Martin, there is a question in the chat from Hannah. She says, I don't get it. How can lower income groups spend more money when they have no money? How are those lower income groups spending more money than they were before?
So the income data, and I'd have to go back and double check this, but the income data where the median income data comes from is from past history. Okay. Previously how much did you earn in a given year, where you lived. This year, it's obviously going to be somewhat different with that extra unemployment insurance, that extra $600 people got. I forget what the math is now in my head. I did it so often during the recovery, but with that extra $600 people made for, month after month, for a lot of lower skilled, even some medium skilled workers, that was more than what they were earning at their job. So that extra money went to paying down credit card debt, or it went to buying a car or buying furniture, or the money actually went to those places. So it was a temporary boost, but that was spent. Now, what also might be helping for Michigan, what also might be helping this is, I wonder personally how much money from, especially those who were involved in UAW contract negotiations with the car companies last year. Remember, those workers who got who signed that UAW contract got a one-time $11,000 payment, more than what was being negotiated on at first. So that was a huge sum of money. especially, I mean, that made them whole from the time they were on strike and then some. Plus, then they get, maybe, you're unemployed for a few weeks when auto production was shut down. That probably also helped too. So the lower income group is not necessarily lower income. They were boosted quite a bit given that extra unemployment benefit. All right, I want to give obviously Rick some time, but I want to show you a couple other things that's on this site that hopefully it's easy to use and that will also can get filled in on your table. So this site has the COVID-19 caseload. It does the right thing in that it looks at how many new cases per 100,000 to put everyone on equal footing. So it has that. It also has how much testing is done and what the mortality rate is. But also it has how mobile are people, the time spent outside your home. So in Michigan, very quickly, versus pre-pandemic, and this data comes from Google tracking where you are, on your phone. Michigan people are now spending 7% less time outside of their home than versus pre-pandemic. You can break this down by category, which is interesting enough. And let's take a look at parks, for example. Look at parks. It's come down, but people are still spending 76% more time in parks versus pre-pandemic. And that's seasonally adjusted, so that takes into account again the weather. However, the opposite, take a look at the workplace. 23% less time spent in the workplace versus pre-pandemic. Hopefully that's easy enough. You can show your students, again, it's all free. It's all at this one website, tracktherecovery.org. There are a couple other resources I wanted to show you, but maybe that I can do that for the next time. If you have any other questions, I'll look at the chat or send them to me in the chat and I'll be happy to answer them. So with that, I guess I'll introduce our new boss. So he's, before we had a branch manager in Detroit, now we have a regional executive. And Rick Mattoon is from Chicago. We're really lucky and fortunate to have him. And so I'll let him tell you more about himself and else that he's involved in. So Rick, I'm going to stop sharing and you're up. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks very much, Martin, and thanks to Derek and also to Catherine. I have to say right at the outset that just how much I've enjoyed watching these presentations. If I'd had such creative approaches to learning about economics when I was in school, I would have considered myself pretty lucky. So this is great stuff. And as Martin said, I don't want to keep you on too long since you probably all would like to go get dinner or something. But I think that, one of the things I really want you to know is that one of the reasons I was excited about doing this job is because of all the great stuff that's happening right now in Detroit, and particularly what's happening at this point in terms of what Martin and Catherine and all the people that have been on this call are doing at this point. One of the things I'd like to see the branch do, yes. Yeah.
I'm just interrupting you. This is Catherine, because all we see is a dark black screen. Is your
I
camera
just
covered?
I hit my, it says it's on, it's blue. So I'll hit it again and make sure. I like to keep myself a man of mystery, as possible. So, hopefully that way. There
you are. Yes, now we can see you.
So there we go. Okay. No, I like being unknown to most people. So anyway, as I said, one of the things that made me really excited about coming to Detroit is the fact that economic education is something I really think we can do really well. And I think the work that particularly Martin and Catherine have done has shown, working with all of you as partners, has shown what the potential is here. And this is a really important role for the Federal Reserve. One of the things I think we've really learned over time is the more we can engage, particularly young people, in understanding economic concepts, the better their success is going to be in the future. And the work that you're doing as educators is really, really paramount importance. So therefore, anything we can do to support that work going forward, I think is something we really want to do much, much more of. My background is, as Martin said, I was at the Chicago, the main office, for 25 years. I was a senior economist and a policy advisor there. My particular research interests are in public finance and in urban policy and urban economic development. So I think it's going to fit well with some of the needs that I see in terms of interests that people want to look at in terms of, Michigan and Detroit and what things might happen in terms of their future. But the bottom line is I just want to introduce myself and say, I want to be a resource to you guys as you're doing your work. I want to be able to support economic education throughout Detroit and throughout Michigan. And I know that's something that, again, Martin and Katherine are highly committed to. So anything we can do to keep this sort of effort going forward, to help you in terms of engaging your students in economic activities, and in terms of supplying you with content for your classes. I know one of the things that's really difficult at this point is having sort of, ready-made online content when you're teaching a lot of your classes virtually. Things we can do to help you develop those kinds of tools are all things we want to do. So thanks again for your time, attention. Again, you guys are doing incredible work. And I can't thank you enough for all the effort you put in with your students, particularly during these really difficult times. So with that, I'll throw it back to our organizers, either Martin or Derek. But again, I'm really excited to get more involved with the work you guys are doing.
Thank you very much, Rick. It's great to have you and get that education component up in our area. I know that there's some great Federal Reserve activity in St. Louis. I was talking to the team in St. Louis yesterday and Atlanta Fed, and maybe this is the start of making that Chicago Fed make their mark on the map as well. So we appreciate your passion for helping drive that education, because I think, with the, obviously not just the audience you have here, but I think we all realize the way that we're going to get change and positive action, whether we talk about social justice, which came up today, or whether we talk about, economic improvement for lives of people, is going to be through education, and even just understanding each other better, and the thinking that goes into people's decision making, and having that perspective. I was listening to a podcast the other day where a guy was saying he's got a water bottle in front of him, and he's talking to people on the other side of the table saying, okay, what color is my water bottle? And everybody says it's green, because from their perspective it's green. But he turns the water bottle around and the other half of the water bottle is blue. And he said, my water bottle is blue from the way I'm looking at it. So I think it's always important to gain perspective, and make sure that we utilize that tool of education that we have, and try to make the most of whatever situation we're in, whether we're face to face or whether we're remote here, and remember those little victories that you have with students every day in the classroom, and how important those are, and how good you feel when those students do reach out to you, whether they're currently your student or they come back later on and let you know how much of an impact you made on your life and on their life, and we all know that they made a bigger impact on us, and give us that drive to keep pushing forward, and to work those 11 o'clock nights getting papers graded and lessons prepared for the next day. So I know we all appreciate you, and for giving your time to everybody today.
And Derek, if I could make one plug, this is something you might want to have your students tune into, which is we're actually doing a special forum looking at economic recovery in Detroit and Michigan. It's going to be on November 12th from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. It's a panel presentation that our bank president, Charlie Evans, is moderating, but it includes some real sort of luminaries. They're going to talk about both the impact of the pandemic on the Michigan and Detroit economy, and what the prospects look like for recovery. And so the panelists include Wright Lassiter, who's the CEO of the Henry Ford Medical System, Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist. We also have Tonya Allen, who's the head of the Skillman Foundation, and then Jerry Anderson, who's the chairman of Detroit DTE Energy. So that should be a really interesting panel, and if you could arrange for your students to be able to watch it, that could be a great opportunity for them.
I was just Googling it, and I haven't had a chance to really look at what I'm putting in the chat yet, but there's a link to it's called Project Hometown Detroit Community Forum.
That's right. People can just register right on the site.
Oh yeah, so right from that link I just put in the chat, there's a register now button if you click on that link.
Yep. Derek, I just forwarded you the invite email as well that you can forward to the group that has more information on there too, if that's easier.
Yeah, that way we can make sure we hit everybody. Even people might have had to go and cook dinner and, take one of those things that they're juggling and focus on that for the moment. So absolutely. And there's so many good opportunities like that. I also know that there's careers in economics that I think that they're doing in St. Louis sometime in November as well. So we'll look into sharing everybody some other opportunities.
Yep. The other opportunity that I can tell you that Martin and I have been working on with our coworkers in Chicago is this year's Fed Challenge, because last year we had to cancel in person. This year we have gone to a completely viral Fed Challenge. And there is no limit on the number of teams that can compete from one school. And those of you that have done Fed Challenge in the past know that we have some schools that are very strong in Fed Challenge, and then we have teams that are brand new. So this year, rather than divide Fed Challenge by physical location, we are dividing it by have you competed before? Are you a team that's won before? Or are you a rookie team? So we have divisions in that are divided up by how often or what your skill level is, so that hopefully every student can get a better understanding of the Federal Reserve through that program. And the first round is pre-recorded and you send us your recording, and then the second round is a live Q&A. So it's set up a little bit different. It's on the same website that you can find the information about the virtual tour. So look around, make sure you check out that as well. We're hoping it gives more opportunities to maybe some other schools who couldn't make the trip down to Detroit or, didn't have the capacity in the past. So we're hoping to open that up to more schools.
That's great, Catherine. And that's what we found with our challenges as well, the personal finance challenge and the economics challenge that we did virtual. We were one of a few states that actually ran it, pretty similar to what we do face-to-face, and it allows us to really expand and get people down here that don't have to worry about fighting a snowstorm from up north to get down here in the early spring or late winter. So hopefully we'll see some increased participation, and just like anything, we've seen some good things come out of the COVID situation, and maybe this is another one where you'll see increased participation in these types of events. So Martin, Rick, Catherine, anything else you'd like to share with the group?
We miss seeing all of your faces. I miss seeing your kids for real on the tours.
Just to close it out, thank you again for everybody for coming. Thank you, Rick, for having us. Thank you, Martin and Catherine as well. The link, if you'd like to fill out the Google form, if you'd like sketches, you'll get 2 continuing ed hours. You'll fill out that form. I will take the results from that form, upload them into the MOEX, and you'll get a notification that you have to, I think, do a quick survey or something to get your credits into your system, and it'll be all set to go. So there was a little bit of a change in that system with districts, district provided professional development, but that's not really impacting us. So when you're filling out the Google form, should the email address be the one connected to your Sketch account? As long as you give me your Sketch, as long as you give me your number, it does not need to be the email connected to your Sketch account. So that's not, it doesn't need to be the same one. So that's your answer, Jackie. Yes.
How are the dogs at the Federal Reserve? How's the shepherds?
The dogs are good. We are still doing cash processing because that is an essential job that we do at our branch. So the dogs are still working. The police officers are still there. And then our cash employees are essential. So they have been working throughout the pandemic, which is why they're keeping us non-essential folks away so that they can stay healthier and safe the whole time.
Somebody wanted to say hi.
Hi, Daniel.
Hi, Daniel.
Hi,
He broke through the door.
Hey, hang in there. Hang in there, teachers. We love you.
All right, you guys, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your evening. And thank you for everybody who joined. Remember, everything's in the Google Drive. I've added a couple things in there while we had presentations going, and fill out that Google form if you want the sketches. Otherwise, I will not know to upload your information to the sketch account, and you won't be receiving any unless that form is filled out. So if you have any questions, you can stick around and we'll answer them. Otherwise, go enjoy your dinner. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yep. Hi.
Say hi. Got marker on your face? Is that marker?
Doesn't show up on the on the camera.
Really?
Oh, there it
there
is.
it is.
Yeah, a new darker freckle.
But more
And we're
importantly,
done.
did he do it to himself or did somebody else do it to him?
Oh, now we need run a DNA sample. All right.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I say bye-bye. You say thank, yeah, you're welcome.